came here over 30 years ago because of the football, and I've remained a Liverpool fan practically ever since.
And I was accused of making many, many changes at Liverpool, where in reality I was guilty of not changing enough.
It's still got like an English mentality, there's still a lot of jokes going on and whatever, and the foreign lads are great with that.
Nothing will take away the 35 years that I've spent there. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Shankly said that, you know, it's more important than life and death. But unfortunately we found out that that wasn't really the case.
I never look back, because I think young players are sick and tired of hearing older people say, well, we did this, or when in 1972 we did this.
Despite their decline in the 90s, Liverpool remained the most successful club in the history of British football. They become an empire, the foundations of which were laid by a certain Glaswegian, who took the side from second division mediocrity and transformed them into European heavyweights.
Since I come here to Liverpool, or to Anfield, I have drummed it into our players time and again that they are privileged to play for you. And if they didn't believe me, they believe me now.
His biggest attribute was a motivator of men. I mean, yeah, obviously he knew his football. That's he'd been involved all his life, but you could say things, 2 words to people and make you feel fantastic. And 1 word to make you feel like you'd never kicked a ball in your life. You could build up the opposition if you thought they were good. You could knock them down in words.
We are the best team in England at the moment, and consequently capable of beating anybody.
The greatest motivator of all time was Shanks. You know, he could get you going out and believe in something you weren't really, and you go out and you give your 100%, and that's the man he was. He just got the best out of everybody.
Well, he was a second father to everybody. I mean, he was a super fella. He was so honest. You know what I mean? You would have died for the man, because you know he'd have died for you.
You just felt Bill wanted to play for Liverpool. That's what it was. And he'd play in practice matches and five-a-sides and play very hard to win. He'd been a terrific player. He used to say that enjoy it because it doesn't last for very long, and when you finish playing you'll realise what you missed, what you're missing. You know, the great joy in football is playing football, not managing or coaching.
In Bill Shankly, Liverpool found a genius who understood the city and its passion for football. Shankly, having developed his managerial skills with a succession of lower league teams, had now found a club with the potential to realise his vision of how the game should be played.
Bill Shankly came, I came, Ian St John came. Shanks was building a team, and it looked a team, and you didn't have to be a brain box to see he's got a bloody good team here.
When he came to Liverpool, he was just like a breath of fresh air. He was just so enthusiastic, and you know, he could put his kind of views on football over to everyone. Everyone was converted, and he just kind of transformed the place.
There was an awful lot of people on the toes when I got here in 1960. I was only a ground staff lad, so you don't expect to be in the first team straight away. But there was an awful lot of ingoings and outgoings at the time, and the boss was getting rid of what he called rubbish and bringing in 1 or 2 decent players, Ian St John, Ronnie Yeats, Willie Stevenson, etc. And they got out the second division and actually won the league in 1963-64. So he must have been doing something right.
Shankly's first great side of the 60s pioneered the passing game, which has become fundamental to the Liverpool football philosophy. Beautiful to watch, yet utterly simple. Fans had plenty to celebrate, as Liverpool won 2 league championships and an FA Cup, all in the space of 3 seasons.
them days it was the talk about Liverpool playing a simple game, and all the simple game was, which I learned from Bill, was give the ball to the nearest red shirt. But again, it sounded easy in what it was, because teams used to try and copy us, but the player with the ball had to work out, is it simple to give it to him? Because some of even our players give it to the nearest player, and they'd give it to him with 3 men round him. So then Bill used to lambast them, and they had to work out when to give them the ball.
But he said football is a simple game. Play the ball to the nearest red shirt. So Anfield, Liverpool started playing this passing game, which they're still playing today.
Hunt, the goal. A great goal by Hunt.
Liverpool have football inside, and Shankly was responsible for this.
It was a great time to be there. You know, all the big bands, the Beatles were beginning to emerge, and other Liverpool bands. You know, it was really a very, very good time to be part of Liverpool FC.
Everyone back in defence now. Hunt, Carl Callaghan, he's done it. Attack! 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 Strong going on his right. Hunt is onside. Yes. A great save as St. John has scored. And that could put Liverpool in the final.
Well, you never know if you're going to be part of history, because you never know, exactly where the club was going to go. As far as the boss was concerned, I mean, he told us that he was building, a dynasty at Liverpool, and that, Liverpool would be the greatest club in the world. And so, I mean, he would tell you that, and you would take some of that with a pinch of salt to be the best team in the world. But we tried to be the best team in Europe and nearly did it.
I think they were the best team that's been in this country since the war. I don't think so. I'm certain of it. Not because it was Liverpool, but they were unbeatable.
Them great players that had brought Liverpool out of the second into the first and started to dominate English football were just coming to the end of their career. And Shanks made the decision after we'd been beaten in the quarter-final of the Cup at Watford. I remember him turning around and you could see it in his face that he had to get rid of some of the old guard. And within a matter of 6 months, the team had changed completely. He'd got rid of everybody. Ray Clements came in, a big lad Larry Lloyd came in. We had people like Kevin Keegan, Steve Highway, Brian Hall, people like this who were only reserve team players and kids. And it took about 3 years for that side to gel, but what a side, I mean, Jesus.
Callaghan will attempt to put it into execution, and very nearly succeeded. Keegan does! Hughes to Callaghan, who lets go. Keegan letting a run on for Toshak. It's in, and it's allowed. The Highway. That's a good ball for Keegan's head. And Toshak! What a beauty! Oh, but a bit more life and promise in it lately as Keegan comes in. Number 1.
Toshak goes over to the middle, Highway racing into the middle too. Keegan. And here's Evans and Hughes picking up the loose one. Oh, and Hughes has got it! Kevin Keegan chasing this one. Oh, doing so well. Great balance. Highway.
Misdirected headers from both sides, and here's Keegan as Red misses his kick, gives it to Toshak, and Toshak puts it in.
Highway bursting on it. Highway jinking round with space for a shot and a goal. Yes, indeed.
Callaghan. Keegan coming round, and Toshak's head. Goalkeeper didn't know which one to watch. Lloyd. Toshak. Did that well. Cormac. Keegan. Oh, what a beautiful goal!
Highway taking it well on his body. And then sweeping past McDowell, brilliantly there. Keegan, a superb goal!
Liverpool are champions. And for Bill Shankly, who takes off his jacket to reveal the characteristic red shirt, this is the man they love.
Well, I remember that we were all fairly scared of him, I think, because he was a very... he came with a great pedigree, and he was quite a disciplinarian, in a sense, and we were all quite frightened of him, I think. Nobody certainly would have stood up to him or crossed him or anything like that. But he also had a lot of qualities that made you feel that he was very much for you, and, you know, team in those days was very much the fans, the players, him, and the coaching staff. It was all very much one. He never criticised you in front of anybody.
For me, he was my God at the time. You know, he showed so much desire, you know, for the fans. You know, on the bench, you can never keep him still and shouting, and you know, his passion come over whenever he spoke about the game.
The guy really and truthfully could only speak about football. He related everything to football. Politics, he would turn it to football, you know. He would say the Labour Party's just got into government, but who did he support? Like,
he would always belittle the opposition. He would always make you believe that they really had nothing and you had everything. And even if mistakes were made, he would never criticise you in front of the press, or we never conceded a good goal, for example. You know, it was always a lucky goal or a bad refereeing decision. He was a great... he protected you in many ways as a player, and anything that needed doing on a critical sense, he did internally, if you like.
Having won the League Championship and UEFA Cup in '73, Liverpool's display in the Cup final a year later confirmed the emergence of a great team. But it was to be their last game for Shankly.
Kevin Keegan has scored for Liverpool. Backheader there by Toshak, now for Highway. Number 2, Steve Highway. Kevin Keegan trying his tricks, and there's the floating cross again. Tommy Smith almost arrogantly putting it there for Brian Hall. Back again for Tommy Smith. Turned inside for Highway. Playing it again for Smith. What a good move. Oh, and yes, it's there by Keegan. His second goal. And what a move that led to it. So Liverpool, who narrowly failed in the League Championship, win the FA Cup.
It is with great regret that Mr. Shankly has intimated that he wishes to retire from active participation in league football.
We were training pre-season. He called us all into the dressing room and said, "Look, boys, I'm packing it in. I've had enough. I feel a bit tired. I just want to spend some time with Nessie and, you know, the kids, and really and truthfully, I feel as if I'm washed out."
I think everyone was very disappointed. I think the first feeling was one of insecurity, because we'd not known anything else, or I hadn't, and my generation hadn't. And I think the biggest worry was, well, who will they bring in, and will they like us as players? And I remember many conversations with the boys where we were saying, well, are we really a great team? Are we really great players, or has Shanks done all this? Now he's gone, and that did leave a great uncertainty with the players, because we genuinely weren't sure whether it was Shankly's magic that had won the trophies, or whether we were actually great players and a great team.
Oh, the most difficult decision ever I made to leave, to decide to leave the club eventually. I mean, possibly it was like going to the electric chair. That's the feeling I had.
The handing of the managerial reins to Shankly's assistant Bob Paisley seemed a move inspired less by confidence than hope. By 1974, the city had seen the glamour of Merseybeat and the prosperity of the docks decline, leaving football as its one remaining lifeline.
When Bob took over in '74, I mean, he walked in, he was ever such a quiet man compared to what Shanks was, you know, and he'd just going to say, "I've got the bloody job," he says, you know. I mean, taking over the managership of Liverpool you know, the best club in the world, possibly, at that time. You know, I've got the bloody job, he says. I didn't want it, you know, in his Geordie voice.
Bob Paisley was like having your granddad in charge of the football team, because the first night I signed, it was very, very late. We drove up from London and got stuck in the traffic on the M6. We didn't get back to Anfield till about 11:30 at night. And they said, look, you know, we'll do all the formalities in the morning. We've got your hotel, the Atlantic Tower Hotel in the city. And so we'll get your car, drop you down there. Bob will pick you up in the morning, you know. Bob Paisley will pick you up in the morning, 9 o'clock. So I'm up at 6, aren't I? I could like wet my bed. I was that excited and stuff, having signed for them. And I was like suit, tie and everything like that, and turned up at the front door about 10 to 9, making sure I didn't miss him. He turned up, I'll tell you not, he turned up in a Ford Granada, got out of the car, he had a battered old cardigan on and his slippers, right? And I couldn't believe it. I thought I was looking for Jeremy Beadle somewhere, you know, and he went, how you doing? I'm all right, boss, and stuff like that. And he was just, that's the way he was.
He took over and then he took off. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, I always say that he wasn't the most clearest of people at his meetings, you know, but he knew what he was talking about. He would do it with Joe Fagan on the training pitch, and after that, terrific. So the meetings really and truthfully that we used to have about the games were nonsensical. I mean, his first meeting, he just went on and he was very nervous, and we're playing doings tomorrow, and so-and-so's right back, and how's your father's outside left, and if you get through Ray Kennedy, fish for the angle, because the goalkeeper's walking around the penalty area like a monkey, like with a miner with no, you know, no lamp on his head, and he's rabbiting on, and you know, we come out of the meeting, and Ray Kennedy said to me, Smitty, what was that? I said, well, it's Bob, you know.
He would always get his point across, even though, like, obviously players have said that, like, they couldn't understand what he was about, or his team sort of like talks where he couldn't fathom it out. But by the end of a season or 2 seasons, you got the gist of his, as he would put it, his jargon.
He knew his football. He was a good student of the game, and he knew tactically what was going on. He also was great in picking players who, you know, he thought would improve the squad. He couldn't never remember the names. He wasn't so good at remembering people's names. He used to call everybody doings.
His knowledge was fantastic. His judgment of players was exceptional. At times, I think outsiders who maybe met him for the first time found that he didn't communicate easily with strangers, and I think you know, people who were meeting him for the first time found that strange, because obviously part of management is communication, and I think he took a while before he trusted you. You know, he had tremendous respect in the dressing room. The players, of course, took the mick, as they do out of everybody, but he had his own little sayings, and he was a Geordie, and there was terminology which people didn't really understand. I had the benefit because I'd been at Middlesbrough before, so there's a lot of the stuff that other people didn't understand that I did right away. And I had a fantastic relationship with him. I admired him so much. You know, I think, yeah, we all took the mick, but, you know, when he spoke, we all listened. And when he spoke about football, you know you were hearing the right things from the right man.
I know for a fact that the boys would go through a brick wall for him. And I think he had some great staff that enabled him to do what he did. I also think that, I mean, they had a great scouting system, and Jeff Twentyman actually kind of recommended me to the club, and other players subsequently after that. I think he relied heavily on his staff and everything to bring the right type as well. Not only had you used to be a good footballer or whatever, they went into your background, the right type. Winners, call them what you like, achievers, and he put together some tremendous teams with a lot of achievers in, and subsequently the trophies rolled in.
Hit, but it's found Dalglish, and he turns and scores! Kennedy on the left foot, which is his good foot, and it's in! It's for Highway, and Highway a brilliant crossback. And Dalglish is in the clear, and Dalglish slots in a super little goal. Dalglish, Whelan is the Liverpool player jumping, Dalglish collects. Highway, bringing in Kennedy. Great goal! Keegan turning brilliantly. Kennedy again. A case!
One of the good things about the whole system is that Bob was never afraid to break a winning formula up. he was always looking to progress. I think that's why it continued for so long. He wasn't afraid to further investment for the club, and it carried on and on.
Players were getting older, and you have to bring in young players and take them like a step above what they've been used to, and that's not an easy thing to do. And I think Bob Paisley done a tremendous job.
You go to a club like Liverpool and you think you're going to be told every 2 minutes of the day what they want you to do, how they want you to do it, when in reality that really wasn't the way. The fact was that they had bought myself and other players purely on how they played their own game, and you were sort of put into a system that made you do the system, but also you added your own personal abilities and qualities to it. So that surprised me. A man of very few words, but if you did something wrong, he came out with a few then.
The biggest compliment I could pay him was that if he respected you as a man and as a footballer, he didn't really have to talk to you about football. He knew what he'd bought, he knew the way he wanted you to play, and if he didn't tell you every week, it meant that he was fine with you. And it was just a really, really nice man in charge of a football team where every player, respected him to the hilt. And whenever he won anything, he kind of put all the rest of the backroom staff forward and everything. He was a genius tactically, and at spotting players to fit into the system. But I've never been in a football team where the players have wanted to play for somebody so much. And yet he was one of the quieter people in the game, didn't say a lot, but you knew when he said something that it really carried that weight of importance with it. But everybody in the football club loved him and respected him and wanted to play for him.
It would be true to say, and I don't think that that if Bob were here that he would mind me saying it, he lacked confidence as a manager in the early days, and he learned to do the job by doing it, of course, and gradually gained more confidence and went on to be the most successful manager of perhaps all time up to now.
This is my proudest moment being at Liverpool, that I'm a manager, that they won the championship, which is the greatest competition in the world, and I'm proud to be a Liverpudlian tonight, I can assure you.
He didn't relish the media side of it, and again, it's even more so today. The media now is a mega part of the industry. In them days, Bill got very little of it. Bob got possibly a little bit more and learned to handle it better as he went on. And it's just sort of gone bigger and bigger in football or sport in general.
You don't even dream about these things. I'm quite sure of that. I don't know what I've won now, really.
The myth of the boot room, where the coaching staff met and allegedly plotted the club's success, was encouraged by Joe Fagan's appointment as manager following Paisley's retirement in 1983.
I think he only took it, to be quite honest, to make sure that the likes of Ronnie, myself, and other lads on the staff there kept their jobs, really. I think he saw that as maybe a part of it. But he did a fantastic job with his honesty, and it was probably only unlucky that the Heysel disaster really tore him apart.
We were shut away in the dressing room, so we really didn't know what was going on. All we got was snippets from here and there that this was going on, so we really didn't know. It wasn't until possibly 2 hours after the game was supposed to start that we started realising that it was something really serious, because games had been delayed before, but obviously for this particular reason it was not only tragic, but the problem was that the game had to be played as far as everybody was concerned.
I think it maybe had to be played because of what had happened. No, because the more riots, but at the end of the game, it wasn't a game. I think the players weren't interested on both sides, you know, and I felt it was just like a void game.
I still don't know whether we should play it or not. I mean, I can understand the reasons why we had to play it, because it would have been chaos possibly if they tried to arrange it again with all kinds of vendettas maybe and stuff. So
football became totally unimportant, really. In the game, obviously, we lost, but even had we won, I don't feel it would have been the most important thing. I mean, another Shanks used to say it's more important than life and death, and it was a saying that he said, but I don't believe for 1 minute that he even thought that, and that day proved the point.
Really didn't want to talk to anyone really for a good 3 months afterwards. Really, it was hard to see all those deaths, unnecessary deaths. We were playing on an athletic stadium that wasn't equipped for two big clubs, two massive clubs, to hold a European Cup final.
Well, obviously it affected Joe straight away, because when we got back into Speke Airport the next morning, he physically crumbled on the tarmac. I remember Roy Evans grabbing hold of him because he broke down. And it was a strange kind of couple of months before the season started again. Of course, Kenny had been appointed. And I have to tell you that the spotlight, our first home game of the season, in fact our first game of the season, the start of the next season, I think was against somebody like Arsenal at home. And it felt as though the whole world's press had turned out, and it was like Kenny's first game, player manager. It was Liverpool's first competitive game since Heysel. And I just remember coming in after that match that we won 2-0 or something, and just being completely drained. Because after Heysel, I think all the players kind of thought, with the greatest respect, we wanted to play again as soon as possible, because obviously we're not playing throughout the summer. The build-up got longer and longer and longer, and obviously the spotlight on everybody increased somewhat. So it was, Kenny's first game as player manager. I mean, like press from Japan and all that, and we're thinking, well, what are they doing here? And you felt really like, the proverbial goldfish. But after that day, that first day, it certainly got better. But certainly leading up to that game, I don't think I've ever been more nervous for any game, including, of course, FA Cup finals and European Cup finals.
Kenny got appointed, which was quite a surprise really to all of us. But it was one we were all quite prepared to get on with, because obviously we knew he had a good knowledge of the game. He'd said to us on the way home that he wants to work closely with Ronnie and myself, because he'd not done anything on that side before. And I say we formed quite a decent partnership, and it was good. He was a different type from obviously Joe and Bob and even Shanks. He was certainly his own man and had different ideas, but never pushed them too far.
Me and Hansen used to have rows with him on the pitch, terrible rows, like real personal attacks on each other, because the thing about Kenny was, if you played the ball up to him from the back and it was like that far away from where he wanted it, he'd slaughter you, absolutely slaughter you. And me and Hansen would slaughter him back and protect each other. And we'd be terrible rows, and you'd come in after the match and you'd think, God, I wonder what he's thinking. He's the manager. And he would just go, whatever happens on the pitch, as long as we get the right result, it doesn't matter. So, and that's the way he was. And I think that really endeared him to everybody.
I think a lot of people within the club, once Joe Fagan announced he was going to leave, thought Phil Neal was going to be the natural successor to Joe Fagan. When it was Dalglish, you have to say it was a masterstroke by the club. I think we were all a bit sort of wary, because Kenny was one of these players that, as a player, you never really got to know him. He always kept you at a little bit of a distance. But I have to say, and certainly from my own point of view, when he was the manager, he was great for me.
And it was a strange year, because we used to call him Roy of the Rovers, because he didn't play for a while, and people say, no, the job's too much for him, he should leave himself out. All of a sudden, the team clicked. Our last game, Chelsea away, had to win the league. Of course, who scores? The man himself, Kenny scores, Roy of the Rovers. And then a week later, cup final.
Reed now sending Lineker into the path of Gary Lineker, and Grobbelaar saves, but not this time. They've picking the pace up now, Liverpool. Now Mulvey, now Rush. Yes! 1-1. Rush in for Mulvey. And he's there! It's Craig Johnston. Oh, look at the space here now for Whelan. Dalglish is making a run for him. One player's gone tumbling, and it's played across for Rush. That's another one, and that will make it safe for Liverpool. And a cup, and a gesture that says Liverpool have done the double.
We'd agreed, the two teams, before the FA Cup final, that we'd all fly back on the Sunday morning from Heathrow to Speke, whoever won. And of course, what happens, as people know, and teams have either won cup finals or lost them, is you do kind of, the old bus around the city kind of stuff. And we'd obviously done it a few times. But what had happened was that obviously we were going to be on the front bus after winning the trophies. The press were on the second bus, and Everton were on the third bus, which was bad enough for the Evertonians. But the worst thing was, on the plane, the seating arrangements were, we were all down the back, various press and officials in the middle, Everton at the front. Well, when we touched down at Speak and the doors opened, the aerostess kind of said, we just got a small request. Could all the players and officials from Everton please stay seated while we let Liverpool off the plane? Well, you can imagine, can't you, walking past the alley, we were carrying these trophies and stuff like that, you know, drinking bottles of champagne. Oh, I mean, I'd have hated to have played for Everton that day, which was a bit upsetting, but they took it in good heart, honestly.
The signings of John Barnes and Peter Beardsley gave the side a new attacking edge, and yet didn't betray Shankly's simple footballing philosophy.
He really was intelligent and clever enough just to let things run. You know, what Shankly created, and Paisley followed on, and then Fagan after him, Kenny did exactly the same thing. You know, he understood that Liverpool, they had the best system, the best structure, the best players, so therefore, if it isn't broke, don't fix it.
We certainly were a little bit more adventurous in our play. I don't think we changed an awful lot of the basics, but I think we went forward a lot quicker than we used to. I think before, when we wanted to keep the ball, we made sure we kept it, maybe too much at times. Where I think when Barnsley came, Beardsley came, you know, they were real flair players, and you know, we had to play to their strengths.
I got frustrated, but Kenny told me just to be a bit patient, because he only had the team around me to play to my strengths, which was getting the ball wide, getting the ball in the box, and he never let me down there, as you know, with John Barnes coming on and Ray Houghton.
Liverpool's football in the late 80s was perhaps the most exciting scene in post-war Britain. But with English clubs banned from Europe, the full extent of their ability couldn't really be measured. Their domination of domestic honours hinted at what might have been.
It's in the back of the net. John Barnes.
Pemberton showing him the inside route, and it was blocked by Hopkins, rather fortunately for Crystal Palace. Nicol places it into the corner.
Oh, look at Barnes here. They're waiting for the pullback. Beardsley! Oh! A glorious goal again.
2 consecutive games after a slow start and linking up with Beardsley. Peter Beardsley deserves to be amongst the scorers.
Gets over the fullback. Now at Evans. On his left foot.
Waiting while the miss was in, and it's in from John Barnes.
Liverpool's momentum was shattered by the Hillsborough disaster of 1989, when the negligence of police and football authorities contributed to the deaths of 96 innocent supporters.
You know, to see it at first hand and be amongst people when this tragedy had happened,
it doesn't sink in. You know, it takes maybe 2 weeks or 2 years, different people to sink in. You don't know what's happening. You're walking around in the daze.
Well, I think it affected us all. I don't know whether it affected me more than any. I don't think it did, but it certainly affected a lot of players. Certainly the local players in the team, it affected them, but it affected us all. It was a terrible tragedy, and it was very, very difficult to come to terms with.
Football was put in perspective. You know, from when I was so high up, football was my life. It wasn't with my family, obviously. And really, when that happened, it was I couldn't motivate myself.
I think, as a footballer and being in the sport that we are, we're meant to be sort of superhuman, macho men. And I think for a long time we sort of carried the front. But I think at some stage all the players, broke down in private, and really it was a difficult time to be a player for Liverpool Football Club. But I thought, the players and the club as a whole dealt with the situation very well as they could have done.
We were actually on the pitch at the time. We saw it unfold, and at first we thought it was just everyone was getting squashed. It was a pitch invasion, and there was no trouble. It was only we went back in again, and we heard about there was people dead out there. That again, it was tough, and it was a really tough period from sort of the April to the May, and we didn't know whether we could play again really at that time. It was a difficult time.
The club had to act strongly and get over this and go about it the right way, which they did. The club went about it in a dignified way, and the management staff and players, people were involved with the funerals and everything, and counselling the families, and the families, I think they got some consoling done coming to the club and being in the club and coming every day, not just one day. They were allowed at the club every day, and we all got together, and the players did a great job.
We went to all the funerals, and it was organised. The club, we had somebody at every funeral, and we'd gather every day and meet the families and talk to them. And if the funeral was on, then 2 or 3 of us would go to one, and 3 or 4 to another. And it was a terrible time. Yet so much good came out of people. Players, Kenny was fantastic at the time, talking to people, going visiting people. And everybody probably made little friends at the time of different families. And the flowers they spoke for themselves.
The games we played after that were, you just couldn't fail to be up for it. I mean, everybody was like busting at the seams to get out and win the games, for everybody, ourselves, the supporters, everybody. I mean, it was phenomenal. I think really it was the season after that where we came back down to earth. And of course there was a lot of, I don't know what you would call it, that came out of the hills with it, that just seemed to be with the club day in and day out. I mean, the club had always, the one thing the club was about was the first team on a Saturday. That was all that mattered at the football club. And really that priority seemed to change.
Well, I think the people who were involved with that were exhausted by it and profoundly affected by it. Maybe to the extent that it might have been impossible for those people to continue their careers because of it. You don't watch people dying in front of your very eyes at a football club you love without being affected by it forever. So in that sense, maybe it had to be the end of an era,
I think Kenny suffered a great deal during Hillsborough. I believe he went to a lot of funerals, as many as he could go to, more than one a day in some cases. Now what effect that would have on you, nobody knows, and I think it affected him deeply, and I think ultimately that would have been a major factor in why he decided to chuck it.
It was a shock when Kenny finally called it a day, when he rang up the house and said, Evo, he said, I'm calling it a day. I said, for my health, I don't feel I can go on anymore. It's affecting my family. So I thought it was one of Kenny's usual wind-ups, and you go, yeah, okay, yeah, what's happening? And to be fair, he was quite tearful, choked down the phone. He couldn't speak for much longer, obviously. He put it down, and I realised that he actually had walked away from it. And I spoke to Ronnie Moran, he just spoke to Kenny as well, and it was a real difficult thing for him to do. But again, it's something you have to respect, because he felt it was for the good of the club. He felt at the time he wasn't maybe in a fit state mentally to manage, and didn't want to let the club down. I think everybody respected him for that. I mean, I certainly did. We all tried to persuade him to take time off. I think the board were the same, to take a sabbatical, come back maybe at the start of next season. But he was not the type of guy to do that. He thought that, well, Liverpool needs to have a manager, and at the moment I don't feel that I'm doing the job as well as he could. And so he went, and it was a sad day.
People try and look into things and say there was other things that made Kenny resign. Kenny was knackered. He'd had a lot on his plate. Certainly the players had quite a lot on the plate, but certainly not half as much as he did. And the guy basically needed a break, but nobody would believe him.
Lee. Guided down by Whelan. It drops for Souness.
I learned far more from the older players when I first went to Liverpool than anybody else about, we at Liverpool do it this way and we do it that way. Yeah, we like a night out, we like to go for a few beers. There's a time and place for that. And when we train hard. And that's where I learned I think, a great deal in those early years. And then when you become an older player, you like to think you've passed that down the line, and the good habits. And then when I went back as a manager, that had gone. That had gone.
Beforehand, if you'd said who would you have, Souness would have been top of your list. They had just won 7 or 8 championships for Rangers, an ex-Liverpudlian that knew the club inside out. So it was a straightforward choice, really. A choice which I thought would never happen with the success he had at Rangers. But you know, when you play for a club like Liverpool, there's something always stays with you about the club, and I'm sure that's what pulled him away from Rangers.
At that time, you know, everybody still felt that Liverpool had a system that worked, you know, and what we needed to do was bring somebody in who knew that system. That man was Graeme Souness.
From running on my own point of view, we were quite happy to work with Graeme. We came down, and I've always had a great sort of love of Graeme, the way he played his football, certainly, and he certainly didn't stand behind the door. He was bold and he's brash. And it was different again. He came down and he wanted to change 1 or 2 things, but nothing ridiculous.
I think that at the time that Graeme came in, then it was a bit of a transitional time for Liverpool, because there was wholesale change at the end of the season. We got rid of a lot of players, a lot of young players came in, and unfortunately it didn't work, because, you know, we got rid of a lot of experience, and I think that a lot of the young players probably came in a bit early, but we are now seeing the benefits of that. So Graeme Souness, you know, has a lot to be thanked for, because you look at the emergence of Robbie Fowler, Steve McManaman, and Jamie Redknapp, and it's because he had the notion of putting them in maybe slightly early, but you see how they've now, you know, come along and how well they're playing now.
I foolishly didn't make my demands, looking back, foolishly didn't make my demands from day one strong enough. You know, I was accused of making many, many changes at Liverpool, where in reality I was guilty of not changing enough. The ones I wanted to make, I was constantly reminded they've been successful for 30 years doing the things they've been doing. And I say all my basic fundamental thinking about football came from my days as a player at Liverpool. So although there would have been changes, it wouldn't have been major changes. But in reality, I should have changed a lot more. I should have been stronger from day one and saying, this is what I want. And after that, I should have made more changes than I actually did.
The club was desperate, they wanted him. And I think maybe he played a little bit on that. He got basically what he wanted, and maybe that wasn't always right. I mean, he was allowed to bring in players who, you know, even when they were signed, people would say they're not typical Liverpool players. But he brought them in, he felt it was what the club needed. I think looking back, that might have been a mistake.
Dismantling the championship-winning team of 1990, Souness allowed senior players like Paisley and McMahon to leave, replacing them with big-name, though occasionally suspect signings.
I had inherited an old team, and they saw their last contract as their last big payday.
Don't forget the Liverpool era was of all the older players, all these international players, older players, were coming to an end of their career, and they were having to replace them. Now, it needed a big overhaul, and for Graeme Souness to come in and do what he actually did, by making so many changes, he had a lot of guts.
Kenny left a lot of dead wood at Anfield, and Graeme had to change the whole of the side, you know. And I'm not saying Graeme was a great manager for Liverpool, because a lot of his buys weren't very, very good buys, weren't Liverpool playing buys.
I think I was the first Liverpool manager to go into Liverpool Football Club where they didn't have a batch of people who had been at the club for 2 or 3 years, had been groomed, and were ready to come into the team immediately. When I went there, I was buying players, again, partly my problem because I'd allowed people to leave, that were having to come in immediately and do a job at Liverpool Football Club. And I can go back to my days as a player when I think Kenny and I were the only players at that time who came to the club and went straight into the team. Everybody else came in and served an apprenticeship, if you like. Sat and watched it for a couple of years, played in the reserves, got a taste of the first team, and basically understood what Liverpool was all about. And when I was manager, I was bringing players who had to go straight in and do a job. That was a major mistake. You know, letting the likes of Beardsley go and Steve McMahon go, when really I should have kept on to them and said, okay, yeah, you can leave, but it's when it suits us, not you.
It just didn't probably go the right way for Graeme, and he got a fair amount of criticism towards the end, which I think was sad, because to be fair, he'd only been there maybe a 3-year period or something. He won the FA Cup, which was a fantastic achievement for anybody. he was a bit impatient. Sometimes he would make decisions and he'd want to do it right away, and sometimes he'd show me a team and say, what do you think of that team, Evan? I'd go, yeah, it's not bad, Graeme, but we haven't got 3 of them players. And he's looking far ahead. But I remember the times he used to drive home after games when we'd been beaten. And I think his wife was living down in Surrey, and he used to drive maybe down to there. And he was so distraught. I felt he was so lonely at the time. I felt really sorry for him. Unfortunately, it was probably spoiled for him because of his heart problem at that stage. And when he came to the game, really under the supervision of the doctor. But I mean, he was desperate to be successful for Liverpool, Graeme, and he ended up getting criticised for that, which I could never understand.
The thing that really upset everyone was a picture of me and my wife on the front page of the Sun on the anniversary of Hillsborough. I didn't know the strength of feeling against them. The Sun newspaper were bad news, to say the least, on Merseyside because of the way they had reported Hillsborough. Really, at that point, I should have resigned, because I think there was no way back for me in the eyes of a hell of a lot of people in Liverpool and Liverpool supporters after that. But that is something I'll regret forever, and it's something I can't change. And every time it's mentioned, I can only apologise to the people I upset.
Ultimately, all you want is success, and you're judged on success. So if you fail, everything will be thrown back at you, and that is what was thrown back at him, the fact that he changed a lot, which probably needed changing, but if you change it, be successful. So he changed it and he wasn't successful, so people are putting 2 and 2 together and thinking, well, you should have just let it go on. But I think he went about it the right way.
There's no doubt in my mind, had he have stayed on, then he would have been very successful. And you can't say for definite, but I would have put money on it. Not been a betting man, but I would have put money on that he would have gained success.
Graeme is an out-and-out winner, and anything less than that is, in his book, is nothing. And he was desperate for success. And unfortunately, we had a few dodgy results against lower league teams. I think Bristol City was modest at the end of it, and at the end he just felt it was time, and they came to an agreement and he went, to be fair.
I'm just very sad it ended the way it did for me, because I would love to have been the manager that was continuing a success story, but it wasn't to be.
With Liverpool in crisis following the upheaval of the Souness years, the club looked once again to the boot room to restore its winning traditions and sense of identity.
I got the call and they said, would you take over? And to be fair, I think at that time I was ready for it, really. I fancied having my go at it. And to be fair, it didn't take me long to say yes.
I'd been there some 10 years and then, got on very well with Roy. Then all of a sudden he becomes your manager. And yeah, of course it's difficult, but I don't think it was as difficult for the experienced players, because we were experienced and you know what to accept. And well, if he's the manager, he's the manager, we have to get on with it. I think it was more difficult for some of the younger ones, maybe to pay him the respect that he deserved. He'd been at the club for a long time, he'd been involved in all the great times. And I think he found it difficult to deal with the players on a day-to-day basis.
If you ask most of the players, they really got on well with him, they liked him. But I think if all the players like you, I think maybe you're not doing your job, probably maybe you are too nice.
Not a bad thing to be called a real nice man, and Roy Evans is a gentleman. Yes, you could regard him as maybe being too easygoing and trying to get on the players, but he listened to what players had to say and then tried to do it, but always gave someone a chance where, maybe sometimes you actually have to put your foot down. Now, yeah, Roy did that at times, but I think, sometimes players, if you're given that little bit of rope in the beginning, then they tend to abuse the situation.
But you get the image of being a nice guy. I suppose that's probably a compliment. But there were times it got me nerves because you know what type of job you do, and you know that to be a football manager, you just can't always be a nice guy.
Despite success in the Coca-Cola Cup, speculation grew that the affable Evans lacked authority over his players. The feeling grew after the team arrived for the '96 Cup final, dressed for a day at the races, and then lost with a performance which to many lacked passion.
We got these white suits for the cup final, which didn't do us any favour. I suppose if we'd have won, we might have got away with them, but the Spice Girls came out and they made the analogy, really. The Liverpool boys were flash.
if we were still winning the league and being successful and winning things, and they did exactly what they did, no one would have ventured it, and you wouldn't have got this Spy Sports tag.
Liverpool weren't maybe prepared to step on and adjust to today's game, rather than they were still living in the past, the pass and move and suck people in, but it was more athletic than that now.
While Evans succeeded in restoring Liverpool's passing game, his occasionally thrilling team seemed unable to mount a genuine title challenge.
We actually went looking for a coach. They wanted me to bring another coach in, and you know, Gerard's name got mentioned. We went over to Paris. I'd just come back from holiday, and we went over the next day and we chatted about things, and we seemed to have a reasonable idea of how we like football to be played. Unfortunately, I mean, as I say, unfortunately, and it's not any criticism of anybody, the name joint manager was thrown in, and they said to me, would you agree? I said, well, if it's for the benefit of the club, then yeah, I don't think it's we said at the time, I don't think it's a great title. If you could think of some other title that would satisfy us both, then that would be a better way to go. But joint manager it was, and it stayed that way, and obviously we gave it our best shot.
As soon as Liverpool came into line and offered me to work here, when you have got a club in your heart and you offer the opportunity to help or to contribute to the work of that club, obviously you don't refuse that.
I thought Liverpool had pinpointed Gerard Houllier that he was going to be the first foreign coach Liverpool ever going to have. It was only a matter of when do we appoint him, and you know, when he became available so soon after the World Cup, I just think Liverpool had to go and get him because I felt he was the one that they wanted. Then they came up with the joint managership, which didn't quite work.
Ultimately, players need to know where they stand. They need to know who's in charge. I think that having a number two is very important because no matter what, you can bounce ideas off a number two. Players feel that they can go and talk to the number two as opposed to the number one. When you have two number ones, you really don't know who you're speaking to. You really don't know who picks a team. You don't know who's on your side. You don't know whether the manager, well, one manager may like you, one manager may not. If you're playing, you're not sure of what situation. I thought it was always going to be a difficult thing to achieve.
I wanted to work with Roy. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. Not because of Roy and myself, but mainly because it's very uncomfortable and probably very difficult for the staff or for the players and the media.
I thought I did the honest thing. I mentioned to the board and said it's not working, and I don't think it will work. And I'd hate to see it take this club, which I love so dearly, down really. So in the end, we came to an agreement, and they had decisions to make, and it was me. But maybe I held a gun to my own head, but it's how I felt, and it's how I thought about the club.
He's done the best for Liverpool Football Club, not for Roy Evans, and that shows how much he loves Liverpool.
Roy Evans did a great job. I mean, I can't thank Roy Evans highly enough for what he did with me, letting me into the team when I was 17-year-old, and you know, the faith he showed in me. So I mean, I might not be here today if it wasn't for Roy Evans. So certainly he was a big stepping stone in my career.
I think it probably had its good uses. You know, it gave Houllier a time to get to know a lot of things about the club that Roy could teach him, rather than just sticking him in on his own. So I think it's probably done Gerard Houllier more good than Roy Evans.
Since taking sole charge of the team, Houllier has made a series of mostly foreign signings and transformed a shaky defence into the Premiership's meanest. As a result, the media have coined the phrase Houlier's revolution.
Second ball, stay there.
We haven't made any sort of revolution first. That's press talk and press sensational title. I would say we try more to convince people and to stamp a sort of a gradual evolution. I don't believe in revolution. I believe in, you know, sort of a very slight accepted changes. And it's true that in terms of maybe the way we work on the field, the way we prepare ourselves and the way we try to be professional, there's slight changes that have been brought in, but in no case there's been a revolution. There, of course, every manager brings in his own players, And I think we've probably made some new signings, which were not known to the public, but most of them have done very well.
The majority of the players here are all either been here for many years or come right through the age groups like myself and Thompsons, Carragher's, Gerrard's. It's not, they're changed. It's still got like an English mentality. There's still a lot of jokes going on and whatever, and the foreign lads are great with that.
Phil Thompson, Sammy Lee are former Liverpool players. They're now assistant manager and coaches, and they work for Liverpool, and we meet every morning, and we have kept in a way the boot room tradition and the meetings and the cup of coffee and cup of tea. Yeah.
Obviously Gerard Houllier, he's got a few similarities between the club. He's worked here before he came over for I think quite a few years, so I think he had a good relationship with a lot of people, and obviously he's doing a great job now.
In addition to his signings, Houllier also has the fruits of the youth academy to draw from in the future, run by head coach and former Anfield hero himself, Steve Highway.
It's about young players, it's about getting players in young, it's about spending 10 years working with them, it's about developing them in every aspect of their lives. And I have no doubt that over the next 10, 20 years some terrific players will emerge from here.
All the coaching staff at the academy are brilliant. I mean, I came through with all them people. The academy wasn't built when I was coming through, but it was in the process of development. And I was, being coached every day with them, with the best coaches and the best players. You're bound to improve. There's no hiding that you've got to buy quality players because you're not going to produce everyone yourself. But certainly we've produced our fair share. Robbie Fowler, Steve McManaman, Dominic Matteo, as I say, Carragher, Thompson, Gerrard, myself. So, we're probably one of the only teams in the Premier League that have got that many players coming through. So that's something to be proud of. Hopefully there's a few more coming along the line with the academy. But as I say, the manager and everyone realises that in this game you've got to still buy. And as much as it's great getting these players through and getting them into the first team, as I say, I don't think you can rely on your youth team producing a player for every single position.
I don't think the future of the club can be in any one particular area. I think we have to have a healthy youth policy. We have to have the finance to be able to buy talented players. The crowd demand to see some great players here. They demand individual players. You can't buy those players unless you have a tremendous amount of money. To develop them obviously is not easy. So I think you have to attack it on a series of wings and just hope that you put together in any one period of time a fantastic team that can start all this process happening again.
If they can produce the local homegrown talent and the hungry, there's one thing about players from Liverpool, they play football with a passion and with a hunger. And if Liverpool obviously address that situation and start to produce the players, then eventually they can become a force again, but not until they do that, and not, of course, until they infiltrate, obviously, foreign players as well into the system, but players who are really good enough to play for the team and who are hungry and proud enough to play for the team.
I think for foreigners to be coming in, the big lights of London will attract them first and foremost if the club down there are doing well, or they'll go to Man United. They won't come to Liverpool first. And in the past, everybody wanted to play for Liverpool. Without exception, everybody would love to have played for Liverpool Football Club because they were winning.
I know at the moment we've got a good squad, young, probably a bit inexperienced, but let's be patient, let's give them some time, and God knows what can happen. All I can assure you is that they have some talent, they have the right attitude, and they have to keep the good work going.
I'm a Liverpool supporter and always will be, and I would love nothing more than them to be back as #1 and dominating the English scene again. And I hope that does happen again. I hope I see it again. But it's going to. They'll need a lot. They'll need a bit of luck, and they'll need a lot of hard work as well, and a lot of money.
Souness to Kennedy. Dalglish to Kennedy. Dermot through the middle. Fairclough. And Dalglish. Let it run for Lee.